There once was an enslaved man named Dred Scott, whose slaveholder was an army surgeon named Dr. John Emerson. Dr. Emerson lived in St. Louis, Missouri, but was often out of town performing service for the U.S. military. In 1833, Dr. Emerson took Scott on many tours of duty in Illinois and Wisconsin, which were both free areas. During this time, Scott met and married Harriet Robinson, who became a part of the Emerson household. Emerson married in 1838, and in the early 1840s, he and his wife returned with the Scotts to Missouri, where Emerson died in 1843. Soon after, Dred Scott tried to purchase his freedom from Dr. Emerson's widow, Irene Sanford, but she refused the sale. In 1846, with the help of anti-slavery lawyers, Harriet and Dred Scott filed individual lawsuits for their freedom in the Missouri State Court in St. Louis. Irene then left Missouri and gave control of her husband's property and estate to her brother, John F. A. Sanford, who was a resident of New York. 11 years later, Dred Scott's decision reached the U.S. Supreme Court in 1857. The court had to make three rulings. First, whether African Americans were U.S. citizens, since you could not file suit in federal court if you weren't a citizen. Second, the court had to decide if Scott's time living on free soil made him free. And third, they had to rule on the constitutionality of the 3630 line. On March 6, 1857, the rulings were delivered. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney said the nation's founders believed that African Americans had no rights which a white man was bound to respect. He therefore concluded that all African Americans, whether slave or free, were not citizens under the U.S. Constitution. Therefore, Dred Scott did not have the right to file suit in federal court. Secondly, he stated, because Scott had returned to the slave state of Missouri, his status as free or slave depended on the laws of Missouri. Finally, Taney declared the Missouri Compromise restriction on slavery north of 3630 to be unconstitutional. The court further ruled that slaves were property, and Congress could not restrict where a person could take his or her property. The North exploded in denunciations of Taney's opinion. If anything, the Dred Scott decision inflamed passions and brought the Union even closer to dissolving. As Abraham Lincoln later states in his speech on the Dred Scott decision, "But we think the Dred Scott decision is erroneous. We know that the court that made it has often overruled its own decisions, and we shall do what we can to have it overrule this." Dred Scott and his wife were later bought by the Blau family, and they were freed in 1857. Scott died in St. Louis the following year. Harriet Scott lived until June 1876, long enough to see the Civil War and the 13th Amendment abolish slavery in the United States.